Hi, it's Tim Clark, End Times Matrix News, and we have Anthony Patch on with us today. And we're going to continue from yesterday. We were into the gematria and the number sequences. And Chris, of course, is going to expand on that with some more mind-blowing stuff. But Anthony's going to blow our mind, too. So on this show, you're going to get stuff that nobody else is doing. And basically, this is the groundbreaking work being done at a deep level concerning CERN. And I think, the Lord's blessed us to be able to put our minds together and go through this material and present it to you. I think He wants to reveal some things to us in the last days. So without further ado, I'll kick it off to Chris.
All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show some pictures, and I'm going to go in more depth with these numbers that have been revealed and have connected with CERN and a lot of symbolism. So we're going to go down that rabbit hole a little deeper and look at these very incredible combinations that tie all together, that just kind of say, wow, it'll help wake up some people to the reality of what goes on with this occult. So I'll get started and show some more things that I came up with since yesterday.
So we'll just highlight your box. We'll highlight your box right now so that we just watch the one screen.
Yep. Okay, you guys see that?
Very nice. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So what we're going to focus on is this symbol that means 369, the Ta cross, the number 8, Inanna's name, which means a lot of different things, and the Ogdode, the primordial egg, CERN, and what they are trying to accomplish, what we see with all of this, because CERN has the 8-pointed star, the Vatican has the 8-pointed star with the phallus of Osiris, and this is the Ogdode with the 8. The 369 meaning is, we'll get more into that, but it means the 3 eyes, Saturn, the sun, and the moon, the tall cross. 369 is the number of octomonos. Is that how you say it, Tim?
Octominos. Yeah, it's like dominoes. Octominos.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been looking, yesterday we went over the tall cross, and we went over how they worship the 8 and how that cross represents the mark of the beast and the ashes from the blood of the bull and the bowl, and we talked about the verse from the Bible that said that cannot take away your sin, because we know only Jesus can do that. But here is the octominos, and if you look in this T, there's 8 squares. 8 squares. You can do it in different ways, but this is tied into the tall cross. And we'll kind of go over this some more, but the 369, Nikola Tesla said we would have the key to the universe if we understood this, and I think it has to do with the frequency of Saturn and the sun and the moon. 369 is the magic constant of the 9 times 9 magic square, and the n, Queen's problem for n equals 9. And so this is like the order of 8, and this goes along with the Ogdode. 3 plus 6 plus 9 is 18. 3 6s are in 18 because that equals 666. And we know that we've uncovered also that 444 in Roman numerals equals 666, and it also equals 888 when they make it into a pyramid. These are all like magic numbers that they do. So we talked about the N, okay? Venus is in French. It translates to N in Hebrew. We've talked about how CERN has muons. Muons translate to the N in Hebrew, the letter Mem. There are there's iron and phosphorus tied into these equations, and with the quantum computer, which ties to Mars and Venus, and the electromagnetics from how they do the alchemy with the iron. And we've kind of gotten into that before with Anthony. And the movie TV series Dig, we'll just touch on this real quick. Here's the symbol again that matches on the CERN building. There was someone in the comment section that mentioned this picture. I wasn't really going to go into detail, but she mentioned it, so I added up the numbers, and they add up to 69. 69 represents Cancer. Cancer is the symbol in the cosmos that ate the phallus of Osiris. The Cancer crab is on the obelisk of Cleopatra's Needle, which is one of the oldest obelisks in the world. And 6 and 9 together make 8, which is the number of infinity. It's tied to He from the boat of Ra. So that has a lot of deep symbolism there. The Aleph N is also the A. We've kind of gone over these numbers before, but if you haven't seen them, in Egyptian it means eagle, Jupiter. It's Hebrew, the ox. In Hindu it means Eka. It is a supercomputer database created in 2007. So we went over these symbols yesterday with the Alpha and the Omega, the Leaf and the Ta, the Y of Janus. We're still working on this show coming up to explain this big piece of the puzzle here. But here is N that represents Venus and Phosphorus and Lucifer. And this is also a translation of the Aleph symbol over time, the bull, which is Osiris. And this is the Shin fire, the 666, the Vav, Vav, Vav. We've went over this before too, but these two, Alpha and Omega, means plowshare. And it means a lot of different things. Die in German, 5, Z, check, L. It means these two numbers in Italian, or these two, dualism and the Y. I just wanted to mention that, Jesus gave a gift to his disciples. They were able to speak all languages. And I know at the Tower of Babel, God mixed up all the languages so they wouldn't build that portal like they're trying to do now with CERN. But that was a gift, and they understood these things. I think that God gave his disciples a lot of knowledge so they could do his work. He trusted them with a lot of different knowledge that they weren't using like the occult is using. So this is the 369 here, 369, the yin and the yang. The Giza pyramids represent 369, the moon, the sun as Venus and Saturn, and the brain, which is the 3 parts of the brain and these stars of Orion's belt. And they also combine with Pluto as the crown chakra, which is 1. This is the symbol of Saturn, the little Z's going down. And this is the 3, Saturn, 6, 9, and here's the Earth, which we'll go over that a little bit more. Here's another, I want to focus on this primordial egg, because this is kind of like the spark that we're looking at. These are the 8. So remember, this whole symbol here with these 8 deities that they worship represent a lot of things. Like we set up here, same thing, 8, 8, 8, 8. The T stands for 369 and 8. And it stands for Saturn, Sun, and Jupiter. So it's Saturn, Sun, and the Moon, which are the 2 eyes of Horus. Here's another symbol of the cosmic egg. It has to do with the negative and the positive, and the swastika, the yin and yang. All these symbols go together, the Greek letters. And this was interesting here. Here's an alignment that's coming up. It's going to look like this. Look at that egg. See it going by?
I think
looks like a cosmic.
We should color it or something, like a nice Easter egg going by.
Well, this is an alignment that's coming August 21st of 2017. And we know that there's something to do with the cosmic egg that has to do with the twins, the Gemini and Janus. If you look at this picture here, this is a whole egg here. This is time and space. This is the sun and the moon, and here are the 7 planets. This is the Earth. This is the dragon. The Tiamat dragon represents the Earth. This is a formula that we've looked at before, and this formula is in representation of the resurrection of Saturn through Tubal-Cain, which is Ptah in Egypt. The angel Samuel is related to this letter that we've been looking at, which is the Zayin letter, which is going to be the world to come on the Teflon of the Jews that they have reserved. But this name of Ptah, and this is how it makes up here, and they call him the creator. And he's Tubal-Cain, the bloodline of Cain, and that was what happened after the flood with the resurrection of Saturn. So Saturn is pretty much a key to all of this, and Jupiter as the resurrection of Saturn. But this was another picture that we looked at yesterday with Dig and the 369. So these numbers all add up to the 369, the 23rd chromosomes, and the 23rd of Psalms. In the iPet Goat video, they have that. The 13th pillar. And so here's this 4 here, which means a gate. So I guess this is the gate that they're wanting to open. Here's the 13th pillar that they did. So the Y in the dualism, they took down these 2 towers and made this one world tower that's 1,776 feet tall, which that's the beginning of the Giza pyramid calendar that ends in 5776, that translates to 2016. So I found this interesting picture, and we know that September 24th is going to be a big day. It is the autumn equinox. This is the time frame and when the Boat of Ra went over the 12 constellations beginning in March until September. CERN starts September 24th. This is the same day that the Pope addresses Congress. 4 + 2 is 6, and 6 mirrors 4 in Roman numerals. Here it is for people that don't understand. There's a picture here of the Roman numerals, so that way you can see how it mirrors. 4 mirrors 6. CERN 666 is a mirror of 444. I've shown this before here with the Pope wearing the 4 on each cross. If you pull these crosses up, they make a pyramid and they turn into 8. So I just think that's a very important date that's coming up. The Pope has never addressed Congress before. It's very interesting. I had someone comment and say that Rome doesn't visit places unless they have defeated those places. I don't know if that's true, but there was an interesting comment. I do find it very interesting that he is going to be addressing Congress on that same day.
Well, he has to come because he changed dry blood into wet blood, so he has to come and do a miracle here for us somehow. But,
yeah, maybe that's the fire down from heaven miracle.
Maybe he's got another miracle up his sleeve that he wants to show us. I don't know.
Hey, maybe CERN's gonna make some kind of fire come down, and he's gonna say he did it. Who knows?
Exactly. Something weird's going on.
No, he's the flying nun. He thinks he's Sally.
Oh my God.
The flying. Go
well,
ahead.
he does wear a lot of lacy dresses. So, okay.
Flying nun.
Here is his coat of arms, and this is the shell of Venus. This is the Moor's head, and these are the 2 keys, the golden and the silver gate, which is the sun and the moon, and the eye of Horus. This was an interesting picture from the lost city of Z. I thought it was interesting how they calculated 1 + 1 is 4, because one side and 2 sides, if you put them together, they become 4.
Can I stop you for a moment?
Yeah.
Tetrahedron, according to Buckminster Fuller, who was well known for the geodesic dome. He proclaimed that the smallest enclosed shape that could have volume would be a tetrahedron. The tetrahedron is what comprises the 600-cell tetrahedron that I use in my model in my book 2048, Diamonds in the Rough. There's your tetrahedron coming back, and another reason why I used it in my book.
Yeah, that is the most interesting symbol that is tied with Metatron and the cube and the Kabbalah. It's very interesting shape. So this was the boat overall I wanted to show in the Milky Way, and this is how they travel over the Milky Way through these constellations during that time through the autumn equinox. It's another picture showing as above, so below. These two deities are male and female, and they equal one. Just like I see the Antichrist as the male and the female, with two sides. So these two and these two and these two equals 2. They equal 4, but they also equal 8, and they match the Giza pyramid as 8. They're called the Ogdode, which means 8. And this is what it means here, 369, tall cross, the 8 of the Ogdode, the frequency of Saturn. All of these things connected together with the sun and the moon and Saturn frequency, all here. And this is Mithraism. This was the temple of Jupiter, and this is what they did, was they mixed the bowl of a bull with some ashes and put it on their forehead, and there's a verse in the Bible that says that blood from a bull and ashes do not take away sins.
I think also that symbol that you were just showing, they cross their bodies with that same sign, don't they? In Catholicism, they do the same cross.
Yeah.
The genuflect.
Yeah, this ankh here are the names of all these deities.
Mm-hmm.
They represent the cross as well, and this represents Venus. Venus is a big key in all of this because it represents Lucifer and the resurrection of Saturn. The whole planetary system pretty much is a story of that. It's like a big clock in the sky. It's a long thing, to study and understand. I'm still trying to understand all of it. But when Saturn was castrated, this was the symbol here without the female cross. So the tall cross has many shapes over time, and this is the symbol of Venus in Hellenistic times. And this is the Y, which is the dualism. It's also the Vav, which is the number 6, and we know the number 6 mirrors the 4. So here's the picture of Venus, a Brooklyn Museum, resurrected as Saturn, and with the golden phallus of Osiris. If you don't know that story, that is a big key to this puzzle. Ptah is her part of her deity as Tubal-Cain, the bloodline of Cain, because I believe that Cain was Osiris and that Ptah was the resurrected as Jupiter. The below was Imhotep, and the above was Ptah. They're like a positive and negative, so they represent the Ptah cross. And even Hiram Abiff, Hiram, which is, he represents the ram. Amon represents the ram in Jupiter. And he was given the hammer in the form of a Ptah by Tubal-Cain. And this is what the Freemasons, they say this in their books, and they explain these things. But this is the time and the space and the T-square, and this is the symbols of Tubal-Cain. And Ptah is Tubal-Cain. He represents Mithra with the keys in his hand. And this is all tied into Janus, and that's something that we're working on. They have these crosses all over. This is St. Francis. This is all the crosses here. They have them on the ground. And the letter A, the letter P, the Ta, and the X. They all mean the same thing. And here's a big statue of a T. This is in representation of Mithra, Thanes. It means a lot of things, but the same thing. The Ta cross, Isis, Osiris. It's the same thing. Here is another cross in Jerusalem, like the Ta cross and the snake. And here's another church with the T. And, you know, it's so unfortunate, you know, Jesus was hung on this cube. Mm-hmm. And they flaunt him on the cross dangling around. And if people only really understood what they thought of him, it's horrible. But yeah. Here's the cross as a cube. This is the hexagon this is Saturn's real picture of the bottom of Saturn pole. It wow. turns into this hexagram and the cube, and this is the Star of Solomon, the talisman of Solomon, which is a demonic star that he had, that he used. He turned his back on God at the end, and he ended up building a temple to Moloch. And so we're almost at the end here, and here's the 8s, all the frequencies of 8. Everything that represents, here's the 4 frogs and the 4 snakes, how it started out in the Ogdode after the flood.
Yeah, and we tied that to Revelation 16 the other day, talking about the 3 frogs, and you yep. have your 4 frogs there.
Mm-hmm. So that's about it. I just kind of wanted to go over that and try to get our minds wrapped around all these symbolism and the numbers and what they mean and how they tie into Saturn, because this here reminds me of the collider when the particles they cross over and there's that spark. And then we talked before about the Zayin letter that is also the spark. It's the 4th shin on the telephone of some of the Jews that they say that's the world to come, and then it represents this formula for creation that's tied with the resurrection of Saturn many, many years ago, and it has to do with this cosmic egg and an alignment. I'm not saying this alignment's going to be a day that something's going to happen. I don't know. I just think it's interesting that it's shaped that way and it's going over the United States. So you want me to close this out now, or any
sure.
questions? Or okay.
Sure, that's fine. We'll just unhighlight your thing and let Anthony respond here.
All right.
Well, amazing. Let's talk about the spark, the crossing of the streams. It's interesting. You talk about the spark that occurs right there. That's obviously where the particle collision takes place. That's where, you know, the Higgs boson, so to speak. Other particle strangelets that I keep talking about that happen. I think the thing that jumps out at me about this whole thing is not only the numbers, but Tesla. And you put up the graphic with the figure 8 there with the spark in the center, and add Tesla in the corner there with the numbers 369. And his famous quote was, you know, if you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. And Tim, I think you were going to touch on frequencies and vibrations. Cymatics, I think, is where you were going with that. And that's kind of where I want to pick up a little bit, is looking at the frequency of 432 hertz and 440 hertz. Right now, musical instruments are tuned to the frequency of 440 hertz. That represents the sun and the number 8. And so that goes back to your spark with your figure 8 diagram. That's where, if you will, the world has tuned their instruments, and how we listen to music nowadays is based upon 440 hertz. Previously, it was 432 hertz, which is the number 9 related to the moon. And again, back to your graphic there where you're showing the figure 8, but you're showing also, you had 2 columns there, and I think we should go back to that in just a second. But your 2 columns represented those 2 frequencies, and then the numbers below in the columns formulating the grid, the computational grid that represents 432 in one column and the other was 440. It's very obvious that the frequencies have been used to control us. That's where I'm going with this. Why would they choose 440 to tune instruments? And that is the predominant frequency right now, which is related to the sun and the number 8. When in the Sumerian times, when the Sumerians developed the 12 and the number 12 and the number 60 mathematical system, which we use today for measuring and for representing time in our calendar, why would they use 432 back in those times as their frequency to relate everything in the universe to? So I'll stop there.
Yeah, this kind of triggered with me more in the historical context of when this took place. What was the motivation to change something that's 3,000 years old? If this goes back into Greek times, and they talk about, and they got into, which was interesting, they got into the flute, King David. They're showing the old instruments that they used with the flute and the harp and the kind of a pseudo bagpipes kind of a thing. And that music was used to worship the Creator, because this is what they say is the frequency of the universe vibrated at this frequency. So to worship in harmony with the Creator would be the motivation. So why change it? What's the motivation? And then you see that the United States of America adopts the 440 in 1940, 1 year before World War II. And then you see in 1950, it's a standard that's adopted by the United Nations, Korean War. So we got World War II and the Korean War coinciding with this, and I would venture a guess that they're up to something. Who's pushing it? Now, I've seen videos where people saying 440 is the same as 432. It's only 8 hertz difference, and they show their experiments, and they say there's no difference, and they actually say they like 440 better. Well, all of us have been raised in 440, basically, if you want to get down to it. So maybe we're more familiar with it. But my position is historical with this. Who pushed it and why? And when you look at the players behind the scene pushing it, we are always in opposition to this group of people. So they're pushing it for an agenda. And I had an article that I reposted. It was really well done. I reposted it on my blog that came up with, and this is when I gave it to Chris, that they went to 440, but then I can't remember off the top of my head, I could pull it up, but then they have a 444 agenda in there. Now, if you do the mirrored 4s and the 6s, then you know that creation is rejecting the Creator and being retuned to the beast, is my take on the thing. So it's almost, that's how I view it. Now, of course, we need a lot more input on this. Anthony's done great with the geometry and the harmonics in geometry and how each shape, the video you sent me with the shapes, the different shapes giving off higher frequencies and things like that. And but that's how I'm looking at it right now, is what's the motivation and who's moving it. And then you see these players they're forcing everybody. There was like a big petition back then not to change it. Millions of people signed it. And the point was they were giving away free instruments and all kinds of stuff to high schools and everywhere if they would just tune it to 440. So why? They're preparing the way for the beast, is my point. That's how I'm trying to say it. So that's where I'll leave it with that right now.
Let's step back just a little bit into a bigger picture view of this. Buckminster Fuller, I really encourage people to look into him and his philosophies. he looked at things in a holistic fashion, in the sense that you could no longer look at the world as separate components. If you look at music, you have to look at the painted arts, if you will. If you look at objects such as an octagon, an eight-sided figure, you have to look at the math, you have to look at the frequencies, you have to look at what it does spiritually and physically. He was looking at all aspects of what we would consider science, art, philosophy, and religion. He was putting everything together. What he was doing in the modern time is really what people like Plato were doing in the ancient times. Plato was not just a philosopher, he was a mathematician as well, and there were many others. But the point I want to make here is that we have been indoctrinated into separating things out and only look at music as music rather than looking at it as mathematics, as an example. Again, in the modern time, Tesla was a predecessor of Buckminster Fuller, but the two of them were joined at the hip in the sense of their philosophy and the way that they looked at the universe in general. And again, Tesla's talking about, if you want to know the secrets to the universe, you need to look at 369. You need to look at frequency. You need to look at energy. You need to look at vibration. But he was also caught up in the mathematics of it, and certainly caught up in the spiritual aspects of all of this. So everything is interrelated is the big picture that I want to pass along.
Yeah, I noticed that. I just want to make a quick comment, and then Chris. I noticed this when I went to school and I was doing archaeology. In Europe, the field of archaeology was all the aspects of archaeology, which was cultural anthropology, which was ethnography, and all this other stuff in Europe at the time. But here they carved it all out and cut it up, where you got to be a cultural anthropologist separate from archaeology. The specialization, and then you lose the connections. And I think it's a horrible format that the education system is set up on specialization rather than integration. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that CERN is also a musical tuning instrument, and I think they had mentioned before that it was kind of like the tarwa of the Egypt. In the tarwa, they used harmonics to open up gateways and to travel through the cosmos. And they understood the secrets of the harmonics and, you know, the magic numbers and all the things to travel. And just like Solomon's temple, he had thousands and thousands of musicians, and he built temples to demons, to Moloch. And we know that the Bohemian Grove, they worship Moloch. There's a gigantic owl that no telling what they do there, but I can only imagine. But that's who they worship. I mean, even the Washington, D.C., if you look at it from an aerial view, it's an owl. And they worship Moloch. Inanna represents Moloch. She represents the male and female aspect of the Antichrist, of like Lucifer and Venus and Saturn. So I just find it interesting that CERN has, they are on a certain frequency. They have musical frequencies, and it's shaped like a zodiac, and they obviously have found the Higgs boson that's a part of this factor of opening at a portal. And what Tim and I have been working on is this gluon factor and Janus and the spark in the middle, and how that ties in with the fusion of the Y, which is the tau cross, which represents Venus. So it's something huge that we're trying to piece together to try to understand all of this. But I just think it's interesting that we're talking about all of this frequency and the musical instruments, because they use that in the ancient history to travel through gateways. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it at CERN. This is what they're doing.
Yeah, let me encapsulate that a little bit for people. Again, in the big picture, the question that has often arisen with me is, why do they need a machine today, whereas they didn't have a machine like this back in the ancient times when they were opening portals? What's different about today? Well, we could put forth the hypothesis that maybe they had a machine. Some people want to call the Tower of Babel the equivalent of today's CERN machine. That may be, I don't know. But I really believe that what you just said is really something that people need to focus on when they're comparing the ancient times to the modern times, and that's music and frequency and spiritualism, because it has been my picture for many years that the ancients used frequency to open portals, and for that spiritual connection using frequency and vibration much more than what we do today. And yes, CERN definitely has a lot to do with mathematics when we look at the shape of the detectors being octagons and the representation of 8 and the vibrations associated with the numerical equivalencies of 8 in different variations of frequencies as you move up. Everything is connected and interrelated, but we look at, the blowing of the trumpets and bringing down the walls of Jericho. I mean, I think sound, if you want to really put a nub to this, sound played the key role to opening portals in the ancient times. And today, it's brute force. And I've said this in other venues. Today, we're using a hammer. We're using the Large Hadron Collider to achieve what the ancients did in a much more soft and holistic manner, utilizing frequency, vibration, music, and sound, and spiritual aspects to those sounds, much like we see with the monks and the Om and the meditation and the positioning. All of that was a spiritual, singular, single-person travel into another dimension. We could talk about the equivalency today in terms of drugs, which is DMT, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but DMT is another aspect to that whole modern time connection that was achieved through ancient meditation and vibration and song.
Yeah, so, I think wormwood ties into that too.
Yeah. So do you think that basically the threshold to opening a portal changed because of the pressure of the change in the days of Noah with the change in the atmosphere, that the vibrational density of whatever that denseness was in the air, whatever that, more oxygen, more whatever it was, the combination of pressures and things made vibration much more potent or directed at that time versus the dropping of this canopy, and now we need a jackhammer to overcome the threshold?
Say that again, because that's it.
The jackhammer.
Say it again. Say it again. Expand a little bit on that, because you are right on. You're comparing the ancient atmosphere, the ancient terrestrial, to the modern day. You hit it. Go for it.
Right, I'm just saying, though, the whole idea of the canopy collapsing, the water coming up from the ground and the water coming down, and the dropping of the canopy and the changing of the pressures, it must have changed all the pressures, the gravitational pressures, everything, so that vibration must have been altered to where it wasn't as easy after that to access these portals or grids or ley lines or dragon lines or whatever. They had all that circuitry. The ley lines were all busted up in the sense of their pyramids and stuff. All their, I would call them what do you call them? Energy resistors or
piezoelectric.
Piezoelectric, but they're kind of like they're kind of like energy hubs where they pump through each one of these to keep the thing going all the way around. I'm trying to, like, breakers or some kind of circuit of some sort,
Sure.
So the water breaks up all these circuits that were in these ley lines that were pumping all this dragon energy or whatever they were using back then.
Sure.
and then the pressures change, so therefore the harmonics change, the frequencies change, and you can't access the portals like you used to. That's
I wanted you to repeat that for people so they understood that this is so key, because in the Bible it talks about, or Jesus refers to and warns us about the future in the sense of, in the days of Noah, and to pay attention to in the days of Noah. And it is so critical because what you just said predated Noah in terms of how the world existed, how it was, why there were giants and dinosaurs and larger creatures than we see today, but we see in the fossilized remains. And that's why it's so important that people realize that today we have different technology because the world is different than it was in the ancient times. And so the demonic entities that are speaking to those that want to advance this technology, and this is flat out, I mean, this is demon possession, this is demon communication, this is channeling, this is talking to the ancient spirits to derive information. We talk about this in terms of getting power, and the Bohemian Grove and doing, worship, devil worship, human sacrifice, infant sacrifice at the Bohemian Grove, which is right next to San Francisco, just north in Santa Rosa. I know the area very well, grew up in the area. When we talk about trying to get power from symbols, from spirits, we're talking about information in today's context, technological information. Who gave these people the information? I did a presentation last Saturday, and a question came up from the audience at the Hilton Hotel, and they asked, is this reverse engineering from UFOs, from aliens? And I said, I'm open-minded to that, but take it a step further. It's not from aliens, little grays, UFOs. It is from demonic spirits that are passing information on to people here in the real time, in the tangible world, and saying, this is how you build the collider. This is how you open the portal. We'll give you the information. All you have to do is worship us, connect with us, meditate with us, become connected with us, use DMT, and I'd love to go off into the DMT drug to talk about that connection, but I'll hold my peace. The point is they're connected to the spirits that are giving them the technological expertise to use the big hammer to open the portal.
And that's all they want is the portal open. They don't care after that point.
Yeah, they don't care about what happens to the planet or any of the people. They just want to open the portal, let's go on, let's ascend, let's go to our new age, let's go to our new heaven. We're believing the lie. We bought into the whole thing. We're going to be special people in God's. Move on through. Forget about it. We don't care if we blow up the planet. We're going to another dimension. Who cares?
Yeah, they just have no idea how they've been tricked. Because why do you think that those demons want this portal open and the Antichrist wants to be God of this world and everything? I mean, this is just, a lie. And CERN reminds me of the Mark of the Beast, just the whole shebang, the whole symbolism, all the dynamics to it reminds me of that. And why do people think that this is tied to NASA and all of these other agencies? And what is NASA started from JPL? And they admit themselves that they are in contact with the 9 gods of a parallel universe. And CERN admits that they are trying to look for a parallel universe, and Janus represents the parallel universe. And so, and CERN, they spent over $10 billion that we know of on this machine. That's a lot of money. And so, I mean, this thing should be really looked at carefully by people to understand what is going to happen when they start this collider. Anthony explained it before, how this is like a process and how the strangelets are tied to this and how this connects to Saturn. And this machine is going to be so powerful in September, and then we have all of these crazy numbers that go together with the dates, and the time that we're in. And then the Pope is addressing Congress, which I do believe that he is a mouthpiece for Pope Benedict, who is still in charge. He wears the gold. Pope Francis wears the silver. And Tim did a verse on our last show that talked about the frogs coming out of the false prophets' mouths, and the Ogdode is 4 frogs and 4 snakes, and these are the reptilian factor. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe after the flood, this was the only way that they could come into this existence, by tampering with DNA with anti-gravity. And
yeah, and the issue of principalities, when we reference that verse about the principalities and the structure of the spiritual world, with princes like Prince of Persia and Daniel praying and this thing coming against taking a while. What's to say that some of these things, your Ogdode connection and these spirits, are not part of that whole upper echelon of that under the satanic realm? Because that's part of this Tao cross that you're looking at, is the 8 and the cross, right?
oh yeah, if you study the ancient history, Iran is very tied to it. The Marduk symbolism and the sun, Shamash. This is, if you look at Egyptian, the sun with the wings, it's the same thing of Iran. And this is part of the dynamics of war, of their God versus Israel's God, and how they want to fight each other. And that in history, with these gods that they worship, and the split deities, and the trickster of Satan, how he's the trickster and he wants to cause all these wars, that's one of the factors in all of this, I believe. It has to do with that for sure.
Okay, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of DMT.
Oh no.
I can't hold back.
We're going to go to MIT then, with all the people experimenting with it.
Tim, you're on a roll today. You are hitting exactly. MIT. Let's talk about the people that are working on the Large Hadron Collider. Let's talk about all of the laboratories around the world and all these people that are associated with this project with the Large Hadron Collider. Have you heard of the clockwork elves that wear the little green hat?
Oh yeah, Keebler elves. The Keebler elves are always coming out and talking to these guys.
Are the Keebler elves eating Doritos?
They probably are. They probably love those 666 Doritos.
You have to watch his video from yesterday. I'm talking to the audience. Yeah, this is so. We should just make a cartoon out of it. Okay, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I acknowledge to our audience that this is ridiculous. When we talk, or I've made reference, and you guys too, that technology we see today is actually 50, 60 years advanced of what we see today, what's revealed to us today. If we go back to when DMT started as a drug of choice to reach into another dimension, to communicate with demonic entities and be able to obtain this information. You're talking about World War I, World War II, Korea, UN, adopting the frequencies, all of that stuff wrapped in together in terms of the time frames. But this is dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine is DMT. It's a combination of serotonin, melatonin, tryptamines, and you never pronounce this, physolysipin and physolysine, which is akin to LSD. DMT and LSD, psychotropics, psychedelics, basically you're tripping out when you take this. What happens is that they're communicating with and visualizing what are called clockwork elves, little entities that wear little green hats. I thought of Peter Pan the first time I ran across this. And there are some connections you can go down another rabbit hole with. You want to talk about Peter Pan and the little green hat. Going back to the origins of the modern technology we're seeing today, let's go back about 70 years and come all the way through to the present. There were people that were going into full immersion tanks. These are saltwater tanks at body temperature so that you could float and you could lose all sensory connection. It's a sensory deprivation tanks. And using DMT while suspended in these tanks. And this is where the technology connections came from. For 70 years, the elite have been using DMT to drug themselves to communicate with these, this is so stupid, but the clockwork elves. And in the communication, they get the information they need to build the machines. So I could go on and on, but I'm going to stop there.
So explain to me, if you know, what is Clockwork Orange then? If we got Clockwork Elves. If we got Clockwork Elves, did they build the CERN Clockwork Orange? Or I don't know what, I mean, that makes me wonder.
Yeah. Stanley Kubrick, incredibly brilliant man. He was the producer director Clockwork Orange. 2001, Space Odyssey. The whole deal with the black obelisk, not an obelisk, but the what is it? The black slab. What's the word for it?
It's the stone, like the foundation stone.
No, it's the
what do they call it?
Space and then hits on Earth. I forget. Yeah.
Anyway, the monolith. It was the monolith, the black monolith. Thank you. Anyway, we're jumping around here, but all of that, yes, there's definitely channeling going on with demonic spirits. If you put on the lenses again, I like to refer to that, put on the lenses of looking at things through the occult, through the spiritual. If you look at Clockwork Orange, if you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, most definitely. We are dealing with people that are representing in movies things that they are getting from these demonic entities. Now we're seeing it with CERN.
Yeah, they admit it too.
Yeah. And the words that are used, inspiration, from the spirit, from the spiritual domain, and also drinking spirits, altered states to access the spirits. And so these people are doing it with DMT because they know DMT is very targeted, which is different than doing peyote and LSD and all these other things. They specifically go after DMT. And I've known people who are heavy into DMT talk about your Keebler elves or your Clockwork elves and them seeing it. So I'm an eyewitness to this, is verified from people who actually use it talking to me. The thing that I find interesting is, if we big picture draw this back into what we're talking about, is that the system was broken in the days of Noah. The circuits were broken, the circuitry is broken, the atmosphere frequencies are changed, and as far as the way the Earth worked. How do you tie this with Tesla? And also, we were getting into the Thunderbolts project with the alignment of the planets, and then building this Tesla and the conduit. That's probably all too much for today, but if you have any ideas on that.
Sure. This came up Saturday when I was speaking to people about CERN at the Hilton Hotel. We had a standing room only audience, and it wasn't necessarily me. It was Clyde Lewis, who was the host of Ground Zero Radio. Big kudos, big credit to Clyde Lewis, because he is carrying the message that the three of us are carrying. He's all over this on radio. Go to Ground Zero, listen to Clyde Lewis. He is the guy on radio that is really carrying this whole torch. This is a man who's brilliant. He can go into talking about what Chris talks about. He can go into the things that you talk about in modern popular culture. Well read. Anyway, that said, let's talk about, I know our audience's heads are spinning because we're jumping around so much, and I apologize. But you've got to recognize we're studying an awful lot of information in rapid-fire fashion. It's coming at us like a shotgun, like a fire hose. We cannot process this information fast enough. I'm speaking to the audience. We have got so much more we could talk about, but we've just tried to be summarizing and focus here. CERN, Saturn, Electric Universe, Thunderbolts Project. Thunderbolts Project is online, outstanding research in terms of putting forth a different way of looking at the universe, a different model, which is the electric universe, essentially to encapsulate heavenly objects, heavenly bodies, stars, suns, nebula, planets, whatever, all interact with one another electrically. They have an electric plasma connection between them. Our sun and our earth have a plasma connection. When I have referred to in the past of CERN trying to create an electrical conduit, electric plasma conduit, a reconnection of the Earth to Saturn, this is what I'm referring to. If you look at the plasmas that are produced between heavenly bodies, they take on a DNA form. They are a twisted helix. This is a dual strand of electrical currents with magnetic rings, magnetic forces surrounding these currents. These are called Birkeland currents. Birkeland currents, B-I-R-K-E-L-A-N-D, Birkeland currents, Birkeland strands, helical strands, plasma conduits. It's all the same thing. What CERN is going to do is connect the machine to the southern pole of Saturn. This is not hyperbole. I'm not fantasizing here. This is the physics. I reached the conclusion of this plasma conduit long before I ran across Thunderbolts Project, long before I looked at any of the spiritual and the mathematical connections. I was looking at the raw physics of what is going on at CERN and said, oh, obviously, okay, look at the math, look at the shapes, look at the north and south pole of Saturn. It all fits because they're replicating at CERN the shape that is represented or seen at the northern and southern poles of Saturn itself. I'm going to take Saturn apart for a moment. There is a six-sided, a hexagonal shape at the northern pole of Saturn, and Chris, you put up that image earlier, among several others. There is also a spiral southern pole, and we've seen the Norwegian spiral in the air that was essentially, hypothesized that the spiral that was seen over Norway was produced by CERN, a dimensional portal momentarily being opened. Well, let's not get into that, but the same type of spiral was seen at the southern pole of Saturn. Connecting the poles through the center of Saturn, which is a gaseous planet, you have Birkeland currents. You have the twisted helix connecting the northern and southern poles. Now you extend that twisted helix of Birkeland currents, the plasma energy, going through Saturn. It will connect with the Birkeland currents at the southern pole that are generated by the Large Hadron Collider. Now, this I haven't mentioned to you before, but you may have seen, many of the people in the audience may have seen the dome that sits at ground level at CERN. Now let me stop there so you guys can jump in, and I'll get into the dome in a moment. Go ahead.
You can go, Chris, if you want to comment.
Yeah, I've seen the picture of the dome before at CERN.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Tim? I'm sorry, I don't want to take all the time.
No. Okay, the dome is obviously there's some agenda with this dome. Chris and I are looking at the DIG series and matching it to one of the CERN buildings. I'm not sure how many of these buildings are on the CERN complex there, but I know the Alice one is separate, and they have a few of these separate buildings, whatever. But where is this dome located in reference, or how? Go ahead and carry on with that part of it.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put the two of you on the spot. I just didn't want to ramble on forever. But the dome sits at ground level. It is right at the edge of the main ring. If you were to picture the the aerial view of CERN, and have the graphic overlay of the main ring so that you were sort of looking through with X-ray eyes 300 feet below ground. But the globe sits right at the edge of that main ring, but it's on the surface. It is constructed of wood. The audience may remember Tesla and his tower. His tower was constructed of wood, and it was a dome. It was a half dome that was sitting on top of the tower. This Tesla was using to connect to the ether, to be able to transmit power through the ionosphere wirelessly around the globe. And that was his big project that was then stopped and dismantled. CERN has done the same thing. We have said all along that CERN is a further advancement and expansion of Tesla's work. Most definitely it is. This globe is the same globe in design as Tesla's globe that was on top of his tower. This one sits at ground level but extends down through the Earth, is connected 300 feet below to the particle accelerator. Now, nobody's talking about this.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. I didn't know it's connected to the particle accelerator itself, the wooden dome.
They won't tell you that, but it is the globe of science and innovation. It's on the cover story is they use this as, let's call it a museum, an exhibition hall, whatever. But at the top of the dome is a metal disc, and it is representative or is analogous to the southern pole of Saturn. So what do you think they're doing?
Beaming something out of there.
You got it.
So I will tie this to pop culture for you. This is the exact same setup that basically was in probably the Iron Man 2 movie, where they're inside looking at, Tony's trying to recreate his father's heart mechanism, and he has a blown up version in the museum. So they're using the cover of a museum to host this. I haven't seen the movie. Well, folks who are up on the Iron Man stuff, they understand the transhumanist angle of it. They understand. I think that is actually a reference to CERN, what you're talking about right now. I'm trying to hook it to a movie so people can check it out. But that's what that's the energy source, okay, that they figure out. So if the Oculus is a beam-to-beam, and we know Tesla had technology about a laser weapon or a death ray, whatever they use, it makes sense that CERN has a death ray or a beam of some sort. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, again, I was joking with my audience last Saturday at the Hilton. I said, I'm a monk, because I purposefully separate myself from most popular culture, be it music, movies, certainly television. I haven't had a television in 4 years, because it pollutes what I'm trying to study on my own and to try to connect dots on my own. I saw the first Iron Man movie, and after that I just gave it up. It was just ridiculous. I don't have any patience for this stuff. I'm kind of showing you a little bit of my rougher side here today, because I really don't have patience for the manipulation of our minds that's going on, and it makes me very angry what is going on in the attacks against people. And anyway, I won't get off into that. The top of this globe of science and innovation has a metal disc to it. That will be the emitter. That will be the transmitting point for the plasma conduit. The Birkeland currents will be transmitted from the top of the globe of science and innovation to Saturn. If people want to know what's going on, they want to see some proof, they want to see something that happens with CERN beyond just, collisions that occur in a detector 300 feet. If we're around, if the internet's available, if television's available, that's going to be the show. That's going to be the light show. You think the northern lights are spectacular? The Birkeland currents between the Earth and Saturn are going to be spectacular beyond belief. And signs and wonders, miracles being performed. Okay, we're going back in time real quickly. I'm jumping and I'm going quickly.
If you go to the Thunderbolts Project, and I totally endorse their work, totally endorse it from a physics standpoint, and as a Christian believer, totally endorse it as well. Their issue with Saturn specifically is that in the ancient times, going back to predating Roman and Greek gods, we had Saturn, Venus, and Mars in direct alignment with the Earth and in extremely close proximity to Earth, such that Saturn itself was nearly blotting out the Sun. The only thing you could see of the Sun was just the rim, just the edge of the Sun around the sphere of Saturn. And at different times of the day and night even, you would have crescents of the Sun. Rather than the crescent of the Moon visible, as we see today in different phases of the Moon, you were seeing crescents at the 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock position, if you were, around Saturn. And go to Thunderbolts, great graphics, you'll see all of that stuff. I put it up on my presentation last Saturday. Here's the nub of it. You have Saturn as the large object. A smaller object in front of that is Venus, and even smaller in front of that, coming towards the Earth, is Mars. Then you have the Earth. Now you have the close proximity of these three aligned planets, providing you the opportunity for all of their plasma connections between those three planets to now establish a plasma connection to Earth. It's so close. You have an electrical communication taking place between the planets and Earth. This is what CERN wants to do with Saturn, now that Saturn is so much farther away. Tim, you talked about how the planet was different and the atmosphere was different in the ancient times and the giants and predating the flood and Noah. They are going to reestablish using a machine now what was naturally occurring in the days predating the flood. In other words, predating the flood, we had the Birkeland currents plasma conduit between the planets. Now you have to have a machine, a big hammer, to do the same thing, establish that plasma connection between the southern pole of Saturn and the top of the globe of science and innovation with the LHC at CERN. How's that?
That's awesome. That's exactly, that's it. It's like putting all the pieces together, you know, because, and I respect that you don't want to have anything to do with the mainstream culture. At one time I had sold everything, videos and all that stuff, but I understood I had a mental health background. And so I took it upon myself as responsibility to rip apart what is being put out in the pop culture in the sense of mind control from these guys. And so that's why I reference people, because they can't speak this language that you speak or Chris and I speak. Sometimes the crossover bridge is what they're watching on TV. And if you can explain Tony Stark and his little heart power thing or whatever, and it's similar to this CERN thing in some ways, in this transhumanist game that they're playing, then it's worth it. I mean, it pollutes your mind, and I have to pray a lot for protection.
First of all, you have a stronger mind than I do in that respect, and the other is people can wrap their head around it because you bring what they can touch, what they can see, what they can relate to, and make some sense of what Chris and I are talking about. Right. I completely applaud you for your ability to do that because I can't do it. It hurts me. Physically and mentally, it hurts me. You're a much stronger person in that regard.
Well, Chris will attest that I'm being Janice right now, but that's a different show later on.
Okay. Hey, I wanted to comment on what you said about the disc and the dome and CERN and the conduit. In ancient history, the pyramid used to have a capstone called the Ben stone. The energy of Ra manifested in that stone. And that stone also represents a lot of things, but it represents Thoth, which is Hermes. And so we know the sun represents Apollo, which is his twin, and they represent the Gemini twins, and we'll get into that more in a different show with Janice. But that's a very huge piece of this. The capstone is not the cornerstone. Jesus is the cornerstone. And even in the Bible, they changed the word to capstone, which is not correct. In some of the Bibles, which is wrong. It's a lie. A lot of words in the Bible have been taken out. A lot of the words in the Bible have been changed. And so the old pyramids with the capstone, from what I understand, if you look at the video called How to Open a Portal, it'll explain how the beams would shoot out of the pyramids into the cosmos. And I know that CERN is some type of nuclear type of weaponry or something. Isn't it tied with some type of
directed energy weapon?
Yeah, directed energy weapon. Well, that's what the pyramid was too. And it had a lot of power, and it was connected in that same way. So I'm just thinking that I know the capstones are missing off a lot of the pyramids, and I do believe that they were like portals. And they're made out of like limestone and crystals and live elements. And they were used sort of like speakers that went into the ground, and they were connected to ley lines too. But I just wanted to kind of connect that with what we're going to be talking about in the future, because the capstone of the Ben stone is tied into Akhenaten also, and I know that they've tried to make him look like Obama. He really didn't. If you look at the real artifacts, for some reason they want him to look that way. And I know that there was a lot of changes in worshipmen with the Aten and the Aten sun, and it has to do between two mountains, which is in reference to Janus and the peaks and Mars too. So we're going to continue to work on that show. It's going to be a great show once we get all those fascinating pieces put together with this. I think that's just going to hit it head on, and I can't wait till we get that finished. But that is an important piece. I think that the CERN to me is like the pyramid with a capstone put on it, with all the power that it needs. It's looking for Ra to energize that piece of the puzzle. If you look at some of the videos that Tim and I did we showed Janus with the 7 planets and the sun showing as the 8, and then Ra in his tomb with the seven beams coming down and the 5 elements of DNA on top of him, which is very interesting. So all of these symbols are tied in all together, and it is connected. I mean, with their own mouth at CERN, it's connected with the Tawar in Egypt and Ra and all of those things. I mean, you have to look for things to put together to try to understand what they're doing. That's what we're doing here. But the capstone is a very interesting piece of all of this. And it does tie into the Word of God with the Exodus and Mount Sinai and the ley lines with the pyramid and the Ark of the Covenant, and then in today's time with the wars that have been predicted with Judaism and Islam, and they both want the Ark of the Covenant at the end times. So I know the Mahdi wants it. They want it for their Mahdi, and I just find that fascinating, just to understand a little bit of that in these end times. And it's just all connected with each other. And then we're talking about the Bible, talking about how it's in the days of Noah, and Tim talking about what it was like then, and then what CERN is doing, and how that is a big probability. So,
well, you hit it with the pyramids, and my representation of it, or correlation, is the pyramids were the ancient times. That was the ancient technology, lots of stuff. Dr. Joseph Farrell outstanding books, go to Giza Death Star. Okay, Giza Death Star is the website. Dr. Joseph Farrell, fantastic books on that whole thing. I've read only 3 of his books because I got off into my own stuff of writing books, but yeah, Giza Death Star is fantastic. The pyramids were the old, the new pyramids today is CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. So I hope you agree with me on that, Chris. That's how I put the two together between the ancient and today.
Yeah, well,
it was like
Chris
a
did the
portal.
fire in the middle. She did the fire in the middle last week. You remember the fire in the middle and the Higgs?
That's right.
So
That's right.
we were looking at CERN as the modern day pyramid, just
That's
at
right.
that one diagram. That was amazing to put that all together.
See, again, you're hitting on all cylinders, both of you guys today. This is amazing.
I had a question after Chris is done. I have a question.
I was just going to say that it's such a big topic, we can't do a show with everything, and so that's why we're working on breaking it down, and we're going to be doing this capstone Janus thing in the near future. It'll be interesting, but go ahead, Tim.
Okay, now that we've kind of laid out the case for the conduit connection to Saturn through the wooden projection, what do you call that again? What's the term that they use at CERN for that? Tesla wooden structure?
Yeah, it's the globe of science and innovation.
Okay, globe of science and innovation. So we're working off of that and what I'm thinking right now. Now, I know from, again, pop culture, I wrote about 3 years ago, I did a thing on Soundgarden and their whole song, Black Hole Sun. And I never really understood it. But if you have, exactly as Anthony described with the Saturn blocking out the sun, you have a black hole sun right there. So they're talking about the ancient sky and the return to that time. But aside from that, this is my wild thought that just happened. We have Ceres out there with the Dawn mission around it as the last circuit right next to Saturn. Is there a way to hook up a plasma conduit relay through all these satellites because I don't know if you could pull the planets into alignment again, but you could always reconnect the plasma conduit if you got relays that don't blow out. What do you think of that?
You hit it again, right out of the park, baby.
I think we just solved the puzzle of CERN and what they're trying to do with Saturn without moving the planets.
Yeah. I mean, it's like playing pool. It's a pool table, okay? The planets are the balls, CERN's the stick. You got to hit it at the right time, the right angle, with the right positioning of the balls on the table to put it in the pocket. So you just did that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. It's like a giant circuit in the sky.
It is. I was showing pictures, and I just sent you the video that was recorded from my presentation last Saturday, and it has all of my PowerPoint slides on the video, and you can watch that at your leisure. But in there, I put up graphics that show what a Birkeland current looks like as taken by the Hubble telescope. These are not invisible. These are visible light in the electromagnetic spectrum of visible light. You can see these plasma conduits in the cosmos, in outer space. And Hubble's taken pictures of these things. They're naturally occurring between the planets. Let's talk about Ceres for a moment. Do you remember when we sent a probe? I forget the name of the asteroid at this point, but it was an asteroid coming in, and we purposely fired a projectile at the surface of it to see what would happen. And again, this is in Thunderbolt's project. They show a great graphic of when the projectile fired at this asteroid approached the surface of the asteroid, there was a huge electrical arc and flash that took place just before the impact of the object. And the scientists and the NASA officials were flabbergasted. by the amount of light and energy and explosive force that was generated by the impact of this artificial object that was projected at it, at the asteroid. And what that is the arcing that takes place between two objects. And it's much like a welder's arc, when an arc welder, when you strike an arc with a carbon rod in welding and arc welding, that's exactly what's happening. So when we talk about Birkeland currents, and we talk about the close approach of heavenly bodies and their interaction, it's an electrical interaction. So yeah, they're going to bounce a Birkeland current from CERN right to Ceres, bounce it off like a pool ball, a pool cue, and the balls striking one another, and they're going to shoot that right off and connect with Saturn. So it's a simple representation, but they're aligning everything to do this because they know darn well about the electrical connections between the heavenly bodies, and they're going to take advantage of it.
You have any comments, Chris?
Well, I guess that's their God that they want to serve, and that they want. I mean, it's very obvious that there's an enormous amount of information that CERN is. I mean, that Saturn is the god of many. Jupiter is the resurrection of Saturn, and that is a lot of temples, the Roman temples, Persian, Zoroastrianism, all of this stuff with the ziggurat, the Sumerians. It's all tied together. It's all the same thing, and this is just part of the occult and the Freemasons and a lot of the structure that they've done, throughout the world through churches and religion and all of these things. I mean, it's just amazing. That's why Jesus said not to conform to the patterns of the world and not to love the world, because this is what they're doing. And I think that that people should know this, that people should be aware of what's going on in the world and why are they doing it. I wanted to know why. When God woke me up, I thought, wow, there's a lot more to history and the world and why people believe in evolution. I want all these answers. I want to understand. I want to know about ancient history, and I want to know how does this all connect. And there's, thousands of years to understand and connect with the Bible and with history and with the reasons of why they do the things that they do, and why did Ham do what he did. Ham was the first pharaoh in the stretching of the cord ceremony that's tied to Saturn in Egypt, and we know that Nimrod was his bloodline, and so was Ptah, which was Tubal-Cain, and all of these things are tied together with symbolism and their mark with CERN. It's all tied together with each other, and so that's why the Bible says do not worship the sun and the moon and the stars, and warns us about these things. And if you understand the talisman of Solomon, it's a very demonic star, and it's tied to Saturn with the hexagram, and it's not a good thing. It's good to know the truth, and it's good to study the Bible. The Bible, I'll tell you, the Holy Spirit is so wonderful when you're in the Word of God and you're reading it for the truth and not for the trick of it, because we know Satan mimics everything that God does, tries to twist around all the Bible verses with the Holy Grail and all these other things which are lies. And we see Isis as the Virgin Mary and Fatima and all these things in the world, and God tells us not to have any other worship other than Him, and not to worship idols or statues or the sun. We see the Pope kissing the sun and kissing people's feet with the cubes on it, and they kiss that black stone from the star Rigel. They say that was from Adam. And they have this black stone, which is tied to Hermes and the Ben stone. And so these things are all idol worships, and the only true way to heaven is through Jesus Christ. It's not through all of this consciousness and this that came from the tree of consciousness in the Garden of Paradise, which Adam and Eve chose to bow down to that way. But we have a way out, and that's through Jesus Christ. We don't need these 7 spirits and these 7 chakras. We only need the Holy Spirit of God. Jesus gave us that gift. He died on the cross. The temple was split. The veil was torn. The golden room with the other room with the Ark of the Covenant that they worship, that was all torn down. And everything was revealed at that time. And Jesus gave lots of gifts to his people and lots of understanding. And I just think that studying the Word of God and it through prayer and understanding it through the Holy Spirit is such a beautiful thing. It is such a huge blessing. And I think that he does close eyes of some people. Some people can't see things. And Jesus himself says that he does close some people's eyes to things because their heart is not in it. Their heart is not true to him. And our hearts are the key. And just like David, his heart was after God's own heart. His heart was the key. Even though he sinned, we all sinned. He didn't do like his son Solomon and build a temple to Moloch, but and he did marry a Nephilim's daughter. And we are all sinners. None of us are perfect. We all are in need of a Savior. We all do things wrong. I know some of us don't marry 700 women like Solomon did, and be able to keep up with. I couldn't imagine that, but I mean, I'm just trying to make a point that we're all sinners saved by grace, and God knows our hearts. And thank God that Jesus came down when since Satan fell in the garden and he wanted to be God and he did all these horrible things. We still have the choice to live the right way, to choose the right way, and not to fall into these traps and let Satan take a hold of our consciousness and make us think that we're going to be able to evolve or become part of some type of supercomputer or whatever into a parallel universe. That's we should not trust him or want to trust the demonic spirits that they are tuning into to build these machines in order to open up these parallel universes and things like that. I mean, we have a God, we can sense him, and he gives us that thirst inside of us to find him. And anyone can find God if they call out the name of Jesus. They will find him, and if they truly seek him with a true heart. And so those are my final thoughts.
Just on top of your Holy Spirit inspiration, before we had the show today, I was receiving basically a confirmation that while I was reading the chapter of Ephesians 2, that I was to kind of recommend it to people to read because it's a very powerful commentary on what we're talking about. So you can go to Bible Hub online if you don't have a Bible and just read the chapter of Ephesians 2, and it's extremely powerful, and it spoke to me today. A lot of the things we're talking about. So that would be a great reference for somebody who's not familiar with the Bible and things we're talking about. The other question, final question I have for Anthony is, are we going to expect anything from CERN and the date 4/4 with a blood moon coming up, or what do you any speculation on that?
Well, I could throw a lot of things out, I suppose. I really have not come up with anything concrete that I'm expecting. I rely on the Holy Spirit to lead me to dots to be connected and rabbit holes to go down. And he really hasn't presented anything that jumps off the page to me. I'm not a prophet. I keep telling people that. I'm just telling you about the mechanism that I experience and what happens in my research. And no, I'm not expecting a whole lot. This whole thing about a short circuit, that they got a small ground, fault to ground with one of the magnets in one of the 8 sectors of the machine, nonsense, pure nonsense. They supposedly sent an electrical impulse of 400 amps through the circuitry to melt, and they describe it as blowing a fuse, this piece of metal debris, rather than having to shut down the entire machine, raise the temperature over a period of weeks, and manually make the repair. Whole thing's nonsense. It's anything that comes out of CERN's public relations is nonsense. Don't even believe anything that comes out of CERN, because it's all propaganda, it's all cover story. They don't want us to know what they're doing. Now, specifically to this weekend, I'm looking for a big surprise, because nothing has been presented to me that I can see that's going to be of consequence. I think it's all ramping up, moving towards September. That's going to be the big show.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
too.
Well, I think we should wrap up. Go
I
ahead.
want to wrap it up with a pagan joke.
Okay.
Now this is for Tim and me. That's the hint. This is only for Tim and myself.
Okay. All right.
Pagan joke. This is your Easter joke. What do you call a group of rabbits that are marching backwards? A receding hairline.
Oh gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Now that's the way to end. Wow. I can see people jumping off the internet right now.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you very much, Anthony. We'll get back together and have
All
more
right.
shows.
Bye. God bless everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.